Today on Trucks, Project Trailboss gets a healthy dose of attitude and function with some fully integrated bumpers front and rear, as well as a trail-grabbing wheel and tire combination. After that, the guys will take you to Johnson Valley, California to watch the Dirty Dozen fight it out for the right to be crowned King of the Rocks. And if that's not enough, we'll also have some budget upgrades for you. That's all today on Trucks.
Welcome to this week's show, everybody. A few weeks ago, we introduced you to Project Trailboss, and even though it's going to spend most of its time off-road, we still want it to look good. So Stace pulled out his spray gun and covered up that performance beige with a yellow that, needless to say, really pops.
Now, one area that most people neglect after they've done some paint work is the detail and cleanup work. So, what we're going to do is finish up the wheel wells with some of this duplicolored truck bed coating, which makes a great undercoat. Also, since our CJ7 came with a 4-inch lift, we went ahead and checked all the bolts and made sure everything was greased up right.
Up here on the front end, you can see somebody already put some aftermarket lamps on the stock bumper, but all this stuff's got to go because we've got something to replace it with that's definitely going to blow your mind. Once you've removed the lights in the bumper, you can go ahead and clean up the front frame rails and paint those too.
While Mel's finishing up the front end, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we're going to protect it. Now, we couldn't just put any old bumper on the Trailboss, so we went to Road Armor to get something a little more stout. Now, what they've got is a complete bar assembly made out of thick-walled tubing that completely covers the front end of the vehicle. Now, you're probably wondering how you get under your hood. Well, once everything's mounted, the whole bar assembly rotates forward so you can get to the hood.
Yeah, and one of the neatest things about this setup is you don't have to do any major modifications outside of drilling a couple holes because it bolts right up to the frame rails. Also, it only adds about 100 pounds to the front of the vehicle, which is definitely a consideration, but a whole lot less than you'd think. Another thing that's really cool about this piece is that it's completely functional. It's not only going to protect the front of the Trailboss, but we can strap cargo or game to it. Not to mention, you got enough winch points here to get just about anything out of trouble.
Speaking of winch points, our Road Armor is already drilled and set up for a winch. That's where this Ramsey 9500 electric winch will drop right in place. Now, the good thing about this winch is it's plenty strong for this application, and it also comes with a roller fair lead, remote, and all the hardware you're going to need to bolt it in place.
Now, if you're really into off-road, you already know what a blast nighttime trail rides can be. But one thing you got to have are good lamps. And since we want to be able to throw a beam up to a mile away, we went to IPF and picked up these Super Rally competition lamps that'll be flanked by these monster driving lights as well.
Now, at first glance, you wouldn't think there'd be any place to mount those lights on these bars. Well, that's what these little knobbers are for. You come in here, drill a hole in the center of them, and you have a perfect place to mount those fancy lights.
Now that Stace has all the holes drilled out, we can go ahead and mount these bad boys up. All you have to do is pop them in place, come around the back side, and bolt them down. Now, the only thing you really have to watch on this is that you run your wires out of the way so they don't get pinched or tangled up in your winch.
Now that we have the winch and lights mounted, we can go ahead and hook them up. But before we do that, we need to get rid of this stock battery because we're going to need a heck of a lot more power than that. So we're going to put on one of these Optima yellow top deep cycles so we can light those lights anytime we want. Now, also keep in mind, anytime you put on a high draw accessory like a winch, you need to upgrade your alternator too. Now, wiring up the lights is pretty easy. All the harnesses and relays come with the kit. Now, on these relays, you're going to want to mount them inside the engine compartment here somewhere where they're up out of the way. Now, the switch runs through the firewall and mounts inside the vehicle somewhere where it's most convenient for you.
Now that we have things buttoned up in the front, we can turn our attention to the rear. And since the rear can benefit from the same function and attitude we got up front, it's going to be Road Armor in the back as well. It's not only got bars for protection that wrap all the way around the Jeep, but it also has a spare tire mount that swings open for easy access to the rear hatch. And if you want to tow something, you got a receiver for a hitch built right into it.
To make room for the new bumper, we had to take off these stock bumperette things. Then we cleaned up and painted the frame. Now the new bumper slides right on and bolts on to the factory holes. All right, how you looking over there?
We're good here.
The only modification that you will have to make is come up here and drill a hole in the side of the body. That way you can run a bolt all the way through the body tub, and that supports the sides of the bumper.
Let's just put it this way. If you're really into a one-of-a-kind setup with a healthy dose of attitude, can't go wrong with these bumpers. Stay with us. We got more trucks for you right after this.
Later in the show, some of the best off-roaders in the country take their cuts at the Mojave Desert in search of the ultimate title on the rocks. But up first, we gotta finish getting our CJ7 ready for the trail.
Welcome back to Trucks. Now we've almost got our Jeep ready for the trail with a winch and lights and plenty of body protection. Now we're going to show you what kind of wheels and tires we're going to use. Now obviously you can tell by these bars that our Jeep has gotten considerably wider.
So to fill things out a bit, we're going to go with these brand new Wrangler GTs from Goodyear. Now this rubber strikes a really nice balance because they're aggressive enough for some serious off-roading, whether that's rocks or mud, but at the same time, the road manners for a tire this aggressive are awesome.
Now the rims we're wrapping those skins around are these polished aluminum sidewinders that we got from Weld Racing. Now, the way these things are designed and built, they're incredibly strong, but they still have a really cool look to them. Now, the rim size is 10 by 15, and the tire size is 33 by 1250. Now, don't think for a second you're going to tuck this much rubber under a stock Jeep. Like we told you before, our Jeep has a 4-inch lift, and we've already got lower gears in the axles to take care of the tire height.
Now to keep ourselves within the limits of the law, we're going to use these xenon fender flares we got from Tennessee Off-Road. The cool thing about these is they're made of a durable plastic that can handle a ton of abuse off-road.
And while Mel's keeping us legal, I'm going to go ahead and deal with the sides of this Jeep. Now, as you probably know, this is one of the most vulnerable areas on a Jeep. Rocks just seem to be attracted to them. Well, we're going to take care of that problem with these sidebars that bolt right to the frame and not only protect the sides of the Jeep, but give us a step so we can get up in there.
I'll tell you what, Stace, Trailboss, perfect name for this project.
Boy, you can say that again. But we're not done yet.
What do you mean?
Well, you know, we got to have something to cover ourselves with when it's raining or snowing.
That's right, we got a top for this thing.
Oh, yeah.
But not just any old top. The last thing we got from Road Armor is their version of a hard top. It's made of fiberglass and has these huge plexiglass panels to eliminate blind spots and give you great visibility. Not to mention it has a really unique design, and for you sporty guys, they even threw in a wing for you.
Now the installation of this top is like any standard hard top. It just basically drops into place. Now the cool thing about this top though is all these plexiglass panels pop right out. Now, that's really cool because you don't have to take off a whole hard top if you want to get some sun. But if the weather does turn bad on you, heck, all you do is pop them back in.
The last thing we need to do is mount our spare tire. You also have a place to mount a high-lift jack and plenty of room in this area over here to mount gas cans or whatever else you might need while you're out on the trail.
Well, as you can see, what we started out with was pretty rough. Matter of fact, what we ended up with seems almost impossible. That just goes to show you what a little elbow grease, the aftermarket, and a vivid imagination can get you. Now today's tip has to do with safety when you're working on a battery. Now most people would think that the danger would be getting shocked. Well, the real danger is getting burned by your wristwatches or your rings. Now let me show you how this can happen. You're in here messing around with the electrical, you haven't disconnected the ground because you forgot. All right, you have a wrench in your hand and it's touching your ring. You crank on the wrench and the ring touches the body and grounds out against the wrench. Now it only takes a few seconds for that ring to turn red hot like the filament of a light bulb, and that'll end up in a third-degree burn because you can't get that piece off until it cools down. The only way to prevent this is to lose the watches and the jewelry when you're working on a battery.
Up next on Trucks, we're going to find out who walked away with the bragging rights as the best of the best at the Warren Rock Crawling Championships.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Now, you guys know Stace and I can't wait to get the Trailboss off-road, but until it's really ready, we thought the next best thing would be to go to the Warren Rock Crawling Championships.
Now, last year, some of the most impressive four-wheel drive vehicles, their drivers and their spotters swarmed all over the Mojave Desert in California. They wanted to see if they could crawl off with the title of the best on the rocks.
For 2 consecutive days, 58 vehicles launched themselves at some of the nastiest terrain on the planet. For some, just finishing the claw and wrecking ball courses would have been more than enough. But for a dirty dozen, conquering some of the best Johnson Valley had to offer would earn them the right to compete against Mother Nature's angriest work in the valley on Sunday. Now keep in mind, the prize at the end of this event wasn't a big bag of money or any commercial deals. No, these guys were after a title that can never be taken away, the Warren Rock Crawling Champion. But before we crown the new king of the rocks, let's explain the rules. Each team that includes a vehicle, driver, and spotter started each stage of the course with 20 points and was forced to finish under a preset amount of time.
Backing up is just 1 point, 2 points. A stop is 1 point. If you run over a pole, it's 6 points. You use a tool is 14. If you go out of bounds or time out, it's 20 points you lose.
Now, a tool is any kind of a winch or jack or anything.
Anything that's not natural, including your spotter. You can't use him for a ramp.
Of course, the strategy for each team varied, but the goal for all 58 that started the event were identical. Survive the carnage on Friday and Saturday to get the nod as one of the dirty dozen that would take their cuts at the rock pile on Sunday.
You're only as good as the guys you run with, and I'm telling you, these guys, they make you good. They make you work, and I'm privileged. I really feel good.
We got too serious at first and made mistakes, and we just said, hey, Sunday jeeping, and that's what we did, and we ended up coming in the top 12.
It looks real hairy. You're gonna have to pick the right line. It's gonna be a tough day, and going number 1 makes it even tougher because you're the guinea pig when people get to follow you. You learn from your mistakes.
It's another day off-road.
After spending the better part of the day beating and banging their way through the event's final course, it was a sniper driven by Troy Myers with the help of spotter Neil Trudeau that claimed the top spot, defeating the Rock Pile and 11 other teams to earn the title King of the Rocks. Talk to us a little bit about the teamwork and how it took both of you to get this done.
You can't do anything out here without a spotter, and you can't do too much without a good machine, so I had both.
Eventually, if the sport keeps growing, you're going to have to see some division. They're going to have to put a limit on the tire size or something and have some division. But then you also have to look at it, if this is the World Championships, then everybody should be able to compete in whatever they want to compete in.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to get different kind of classes eventually.
you know, maybe the door slammer class and the tube frame class, or maybe tire size class. I'm not sure, but it doesn't bother me if, like, the sniper beats me. That's for sure. It doesn't hurt my feelings.
I look at it, it's a different plateau. It's bringing the whole sport to a different level. Maybe down the road they'll separate the two into two different classes.
Well, until they have those classes at the annual Rock Crawling Championships, anyone who wants to be the next king of the rocks will have to take dead aim at a sniper.
Coming up, the guys have some budget upgrades for you that can be done in your own driveway and are street legal. Just can't get enough of trucks? Check us out online at truckstv.com.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Now, one of the biggest questions that people are always asking us is, what kind of modifications can I do to give me more horsepower, but don't take special skills or special tools and is still street legal?
Now, with that question in mind, we're going to show you some parts, tell you what they do, and give you some ballpark estimates as to what kind of horsepower you can expect to pick up.
Now, the first thing we're going to deal with is the exhaust system. Now, a catback system bolts on at the catalytic converter and replaces a stock restrictive muffler and tailpipe with some really nice high-flowing pieces. By the way, this really is something you can do in your driveway. The benefits, of course, are a good sound, and you're looking at picking up around 5 to 10 horsepower. Now, I know that doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, this is just correcting one part of a real restrictive system.
Now, as we've told you before, for your motor to run at peak performance, it's got to be able to breathe in and out. The easiest way to make that happen is to replace your stock filter system as well as the air intake with a good high-flowing aftermarket setup that'll give your power plant a big breath of fresh air and give you an extra 3 to 7 horse. Also, for what it's worth, this would definitely fall into the category of a simple bolt-on.
Without a doubt, one of the most restrictive areas to the performance of your engine is the stock exhaust manifold. That's why putting on a set of headers and the corresponding Y-pipe is a must. Now, putting these things on can be kind of a challenge depending on the style that you get. Sometimes they slide right on, sometimes you have to grind and drill a little bit, and sometimes you have to unbolt one side of the engine and jack it up so you get some more clearance, so be prepared. The good part to all this is you can pick up a good 20 to 25 horsepower.
One of the realities of a fuel-injected vehicle is that it's controlled by a computer, which controls everything from the ignition timing to shift points and the rev limiter, just to name a few. Now, on older vehicles, you have a replaceable chip that just pops right in. Newer vehicles, on the other hand, have sealed systems that have to be reprogrammed externally, which is exactly where aftermarket goodies like the Power Programmer come in. Installation's pretty straightforward. Just plug it in and follow the prompts. If you go this way, you can expect 15 to 20 extra horse.
Of course, we've only scratched the surface of performance bolt-ons, and in the weeks to come, we'll show you some more. Now, these numbers we've given you are based on our own results on the dyno, but keep in mind, there's a lot of variables when it comes to getting horsepower, and each application and product is different. These numbers will give you a good guideline.
And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
Now, everybody should know one of the worst things you can do when you're off-roading is grab for the roll bar, especially when the ride gets rough, mostly because it's a really good way to lose a few fingers if you happen to roll over. Problem is, what do you grab for? Well, that's where Performance Products can really help you out. They've designed these really slick handles that wrap around the bar wherever you want them, providing secure handholds for you and your passengers. Get the ultimate in safety with the Ultimate Sports Handle for about 30 bucks.
Now, how cool would it be to be sitting at the breakfast table on a cold morning, drinking a cup of coffee, reach over, hit a button, and hear your truck start out in the driveway? That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Now, add to that a state-of-the-art alarm system, and you have what AudioVox calls the Prestige Platinum. Now, on top of the alarm system, you have remote keyless entry, power window control, and the best part is you can use this on more than one vehicle. So now you have security and convenience for about 250 bucks. That's going to do it for Truck Gear. Here's a look at next week's show.
If you drive a diesel truck, you won't want to miss next week's show, because we're going to bolt on one of the hottest diesel upgrades the aftermarket has to offer. After that, we've got one hummer of a vehicle to show you before the moment everyone's been waiting for. That's right, the Wicked Willie's makes a return appearance in the truck shop. That's all next week on Trucks.
That's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, we got more trucks for you next week.
Let's go see what this thing will do.
All right.
Trucks is an RTM production.